just as easy.
You got about
hearing
30
me talk too,
seconds.
so
Okay. We got what?
they're tired
About
of hearing
30
me talk too.
seconds still.
Okay. The other day I was on a training kind of like this, except I was a participant. And the whole time I was making zucchini lasagna. I was like, so I kind of want to use the chat box and see who's doing the most interesting thing right now, because it turned out really good. So that made me glad. I was like,
Was it the flat kind or did you do rolls?
no, I did it in layers,
Okay.
like regular lasagna, except I used fried zucchini instead of lasagna noodles. I have a garden that kind of overtook itself, and so now I've become very creative on what I make. So
We've been doing the same with zucchini.
it's fun.
They make pretty good brownies too.
Mm-hmm. And bread and zucchini patties, if you shred them and mix them with a bunch of stuff.
Now I'm hungry.
All right. I've got 30 seconds, and then I'm actually going to start.
You're on, Keith.
Okay. Just a real quick introduction of myself. My name's Keith Tremblay. I am right now a behavior specialist counselor that works with Fairfield County Juvenile Court. I've been here about a year and a half. If we look at the last 25-ish years of my life, I've spent about 15 of them or 16 at Lighthouse, the domestic violence shelter, working specifically with kids who had domestic violence and mostly physical and sexual abuse issues. So that was kind of my background. I spent a few years, the short version is I got stressed out, overwhelmed, lost my mind somewhere, and after working about 14 years there, said, I need a break. So I spent some time meditating and walking and traveling and going to mountaintops, and then came back and spent a few years working in the substance abuse field. So that is kind of who I am, and that is how I've come to the topic of trauma. What I hope to accomplish today, I really want to just share with you a little bit about what my view of trauma is, because I think a lot of what we do is way more about mindset than specific technique. So it's important to me that people think about trauma a specific way. I want to discuss a little bit what a trauma responsive environment looks like. And I want to look at a few sort of specific responses we can do in terms of interventions. I guess I'm going to start with, sometimes when we start to think about trainings like this, we try to think about how we're going to respond to very specific behaviors of a few specific kids. And that is not what this is about for me. Because if we get to a place where people are acting out, where people are responding a certain way, we're at a place where we need to be doing some more front-end work. So it's how do we start at the beginning? How do we understand? How do we intervene? And how do we move to a place where we're having fewer and fewer of those things where we need to intervene? And we'll talk, I won't go into behavior stuff. This is a huge topic to me, so I'm going to try to cover it as best I can. I am also open to if people have things they want to share, and there may be places where I ask you to do it, but it's kind of, we'll see how it goes. So trauma-informed care is about the type of communities we create. It's about the programs and policies we set up, ones that allow us to do the things that we intuitively know are good work, even though they don't necessarily always fit well into a treatment plan or a lesson plan. It's how we carry ourselves in our daily action. And it's really how we work with ourselves and each other in those very most difficult moments. So I want to start with an audio. This is actually a tape of Tara Brock, and she is a psychologist who works in Washington, D.C., and she's also a meditation teacher. But this is a story that a client of hers, an adult, wrote that that kind of talks about a certain way of perceiving trauma. So Dean, you are my person I can see in the corner of my screen. So if you can hear this well, give me some sort of thumbs up or something.
Some of you and shared before that I'd like to unpack a little more today. That for me was really very illustrative of what's possible in working with trauma. And this woman, Diane, was doing some Buddhist practice at the time, but very little. And she was with me as a client, and at part of our process, this is a story she shared. Read you the story first, and then go on to talking about the process of therapy after that. So it starts, she's a 7-year-old hiding in a closet, terrified after an unexpected attack by her drunk and enraged father. The little girl's praying, "Help, I can't take it anymore," and opens her eyes to see a fairy in a haze of blue with a glittering wand. And she lets the fairy know how her father's been beating her and her mother doesn't help, and how she feels they both wish that she was dead. Fairy listens with tears in her eyes and then tells her that while she can't make all this pain disappear, she can help her get through this time. She can help her forget and then remember later when she's able to handle it. With a wave of the wand, the good fairy said, "I'm going to send things into different parts of your body, and they're going to hold them for you until you feel strong enough to let them move freely again." And then she explains how she's going to tighten and dull the little girl's pelvis and belly and constrict her heart and her throat to protect her from feeling the raw intensity of the hurt and the fear, and from feeling her brokenheartedness. You'll have trouble feeling and being close to people, but it will be your way of surviving. At those times that the pain erupts, you will find your own ways to control it, ways that may not look good to the world, but will be of temporary comfort. And you, my darling, will be a fairly functional human being in spite of all this, because you have a strong mind and you can hold all this in. And I will be helping you. The child, looking directly into the fairy's eyes, asked, "How will you help? Will you come back to see me?" "You will not forget everything. I will leave a voice inside you that will urge you to reconnect with your whole self. It may be a very long time or a very long process, but gradually you'll feel a calling to step out of imprisoning beliefs, to unwind your body and release what it has been holding all these years. You will learn the art of sacred presence. There will be a physical and emotional pain as you open, but you will have what you need, the compassion and wisdom and support of others to be a whole person, spiritually awake, but still the same. This is because your soul has always been there, just hidden by the scars of this lifetime." The good fairy put her arm around the child's shoulders and gently led her into her bed. She waved her wand and stood by as the little girl relaxed finally into deep sleep. She gazed tenderly at the small, innocent face and then whispered her goodbye. "When you wake up, you will forget I was there. You will forget you asked for help. You'll forget the sharpness of your daily pain. This is the only way I know to get you through this. You are a beautiful child. I love you. And in fact, your parents love you, although they're incapable of showing it to you. You will have to love yourself enough to heal so that when you are older, your life will be powerful, full, and free. One day you will know who you really are. You will trust your goodness. You will know your belonging. Until then, and for always, I love you." When I first shared this classes, of course, with Diane's permission.
So I've
At one of my Wednesday night classes. I had never had that many people wanting to talk afterward.
So I use this story because there's a few things I really think it illustrates well from the way I understand things. If I could pick one line out, the way you cope with things will not look good to the rest of the world, but they will be what you have to do to survive. I think when we start looking at the behaviors of individuals who have been traumatized, we at times get stuck focusing on the behavior. And what we forget is that those behaviors are very specific tools that have been developed by an individual as a way to protect them, as a way to keep them safe, as a way to make them okay. So I've seen a lot of judgment that goes towards whether it's kids or adults, that kind of says this behavior that you're using that you've kind of developed as a way to protect yourself against all the hurt that you've experienced or all the shame that you're feeling is not okay. So when you start looking at the behavior of people who have been traumatized, it becomes very, very helpful for you to, instead of feeling personally attacked or annoyed, to really become curious. How does this behavior help this individual protect themselves, stay safe, and help them avoid something that they can't deal with yet? Because when you ask that question, you get a very specific response in your mind if you pay enough attention with it, and it starts to tell you, what are the things that I need to build up in this kid? What resources do I need to give them so that they don't need this survival strategy anymore? The other part of it that I liked is the way we respond to trauma. We now very, very much understand is not a logical thing. It is a brain response. It is a physiological response that happens at a level so much before cognition. And we're going to go back to this later, but I just want to touch on it now so that it keeps fresh in your head in case someone falls asleep. I'm going to make really loud noises every few minutes just to see what happens. See who goes into stress response. It should work. Think of the brain, and you've heard this a million times, but I just want you to pay attention to it for a second. This has fascinated me 1,000 times. You have a very basic brain that kind of keeps you functioning. You have your reactive brain, and then you have your cerebral cortex, your thinking brain. We could spend a lot of time on it, but we're not going to. You've heard this a bunch of times. Trauma reactions rewire that limbic system, that early part of your brain. And so what becomes as a normal stress response becomes replayed over and over and over and over again. So what happens as, oh, I'm just going to respond to this and then be able to relax, gets stuck. And so this person is very reactive to everything that's going on. And there's probably 3 things I want you to remember from what I say today. And this is one of them. I was at a training with Beezer van der Kolk a few years ago, who does a lot of research in trauma. And he was showing brain scans, and what they were showing that when you take a person who has been through a lot of developmental trauma and they're under stress, the part of their brain, the reactive brain, that midbrain part, is absolutely lit up. And that you knew, but this was the part that fascinated me. This part of their brain was not firing. So there wasn't a lot of activity in this part of their brain that's logical. And this is why it matters, because we spend so much time logically teaching kids, well, when you get upset, you need to, when you do this, you need to, when this happens, you need to. And then as soon as they're triggered, boom, which is not a process, it is a reaction to something that's going on, that part of the brain is no longer working and they're responding from here. And then here's the part that, I was going to say pisses me off, but I can't talk like that in front of people. So this is the part that bothers me a little bit. What I have seen over and over again is we come back after and then say to the kid, well, why didn't you use those skills we taught you? Why didn't you do this that we did with you? Why didn't you? And so we now have this process where they're feeling out of control. They've done all these things, and our response to it is added to it by putting this level of shame and kind of reinforcing this belief that they've screwed up again and they should be better than this and there is something wrong with them. And so it becomes very imperative to watch how we help kids come out of that trauma response, because as they go in, they don't have access to the things that we've taught them. They don't have access to the skills that we've given them. So it's our imperative to be there and help them get through it. And then when they come out, help them relax, help them regulate, and then learn something from it. Man, I'm one slide into 15. I'm 15 minutes in, we're in trouble. I'm gonna say this because I've said this in every training I've done on trauma in the last 25 years. It's Ericksonian development. Your job the first 2 years of your life is to learn that the world is safe and predictable. You're hungry, somebody feeds you. You're uncomfortable, somebody comforts you. You're scared, someone is there to help you. And from that, you get this basic idea that the world is a safe and predictable place. It becomes kind of your worldview, is that, all right, this isn't such a bad place. Take an infant who grows up with untreated substance abuse, untreated mental illness, domestic violence, child abuse, severe neglect. What will happen is their worldview will go from this world's an okay place and everything's all right to, you know what, even when things are sort of okay, I have no idea when all hell is going to break loose. I spent a long time working with domestic violence kids. And if you've ever been around domestic violence, there's this part where things sort of even out a little bit and everyone's making promises, especially early on, it goes away later, and are trying to make things okay. But you don't know when the shit's going to hit the fan next. You don't know when things are going to fall apart. So you have to stay in that vigilant place all the time. And I've said that for years. And now what backs us up is that is what the research is saying, is that if you spend your time in that unpredictability and chaos, your brain resets so that you are always ready for the next fearful thing. And a lot of these things I'm going to loop back to, but I'm just kind of introducing a few things. Developmental impacts. Attachment, which is kind of an uncertainty about the reliability and predictability of other people, that inability to kind of connect. There's a physiological change, and I'm going to say that 1,000 times today, because if you take 3 things away, one of them is trauma is a physiological adaptation of the body to a unhealthy environment. Affect regulation. There's some behaviors that go with it. There's cognitions, a difficulty in paying attention, a difficulty in executive functioning, difficulty learning, difficulty focusing, and also a self-concept part, which kind of in my head boils down to a few things. The world's not safe, things aren't predictable, and I'm a piece of shit. No one has their kids in the room, right? I kind of talk like this. It always worries me when I start talking like this. I'm like, oh, people are at home. Someone's having to have their kids around. I'm going to talk about bad stuff all day. So I kind of get heavy. Because if you grow up especially early, the mindset that you get is not these people that are doing this stuff to me are bad, but I am bad and I am not okay. I will tell you that I'm going to try to not story tell too much, but it's not going to happen. The saddest kid I ever worked with initially was a kid who had some major attachment stuff and some really long-term developmental trauma. And you could watch it. Anytime someone would give him a compliment, would say something positive to him, would kind of be, gosh, you're a good kid. You could just watch him in his head go, yeah, right. And if you kind of pushed it, he was going to go off on you because hearing that was so uncomfortable for him. So all of that stuff that people were trying to do with positive reinforcement and all of this building them up was just too much for him. And so we had to pull people back. And if you've never read The Nurtured Heart Approach by Glasser, it's an older book now, but he has this great approach to starting with kids like that. And this is one of my little tricks that I learned along the way. If you have a kid that can't intake positive messages, they're not there where they can hear good things about themselves, you take it a step back and begin with just noticing them. Oh, I noticed you're playing with a blue block. Oh, you're wearing a green shirt today. Because it takes that good and bad out of it. It takes that judgment out of it. And it takes that, oh, if she really knew me, she'd know what an awful kid I was. And it just becomes, hey, you're there. I see you. I notice you. And then once they can actually be seen and noticed, then you can actually start to build the positive stuff. But sometimes you have to notice when the things that we do that are traditionally helpful with a lot of kids are very, very disruptive with these kids. And just really quickly, so what does this look like in a kid? Decreased sense of safety, inability to trust, inability to relax, decreased control of emotions, always skin in the environment for threats, hypersensitivity to facial expressions and tones. They're kids that don't know their own internal sense well, but they definitely are very good at paying attention to the environment to make sure that they know when something's about to go bad. So they're very, very aware kind of kids. Decreased reasoning, problem solving, especially when they're activated. And again, not going to go into it a lot, but the ACEs stuff basically said, we have adverse experience, it affects our neurodevelopment, it messes with our social, emotional, cognitive ability to relate to things. And out of that, it has it. And 2 seconds worth of it, if you've never looked at the ACEs stuff, I actually listened to a speaker yesterday, and he said, who's looking at the research, a kid that's had the first year of his life being very chaotic and disruptive, but is placed in a structured, consistent, loving environment, has a worse outcome long-term than a kid that has kind of structure and predictability for the first year of his life, but then due to circumstances ends up in that chaotic environment. So that early building blocks of the brain has so much impact. So early childhood people are my favorite people in the world because they get this. They know that core stuff that has to happen. And if you ever want to set me off, just say, oh, he was early. It happened to him when he was young. Kids are resilient. He didn't remember, because I still hear that stuff from even professionals out there. And if you take something else away from me, early childhood developmental stuff matters more than anything else. And that's why the ACEs stuff was so fascinating. It looked at if you had 4 or more of these domestic violence, child abuse, neglect, substance abuse in the family, parent incarceration, separation from somebody. I always forget one. But if you have 4 out of these 9 things, your chances of developing heart disease goes up by 250%. Your chances of committing suicide as an adult go up 1,500%. Your chances of developing cancer, your chances of developing arthritis. And this is one of the ones that I've heard over time. If you had early childhood adverse experiences, your chances of dying, you tend to die 20 years earlier than if you didn't have those things, even if you didn't have a lot of the health stuff going on. So if you haven't spent any time with the ACEs stuff, it is so fascinating to watch. All right. A few other things I want to get in my head, and then we're going to move on to some other things. We have a zone of resiliency where we don't have to be okay all the time, but we have to be in this place where we can function. When we end up with stressors over and over again so that we have that kind of traumatic reaction, we can either get stuck in this very high zone, edgy, irritable, anxious, a lot of physiological problems. And so you're pretty much in a sympathetic response all the time, or we end up in a freeze response where we're just, I saw this a lot when some of the COVID stuff hit. People kind of had a high zone response and were living off adrenaline. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to get through it. And they were pushing themselves and they were kind of making things happen, but it was at a very frenetic kind of over edgy kind of place. And then their cortisol ran out, their adrenaline ran out, and you just watched them crash. And then you saw them sitting on the couch, not able to move and not able to, oh, I need to do that, but I can't get myself motivated. Oh, I can't move forward. I can't make something happen. And this complete flatness that happened. So as you see kids, as you start to think, all right, there's this resiliency zone, and my job is to kind of make it a little bit bigger so that he spends less time getting stuck and less time getting shut off. How do we make this bigger? I'm going to skip a couple things. This is the very biggest thing I want you to remember coming out of this. Because this is, if I could define the role of an intervener in trauma systems, this is it. Your normal response to trauma is a lot like a doorbell. Something scary happens, there's a loud noise, your body reacts to it, you kind of tense up, you're tight, you notice things are okay, your body shakes a little bit, you take a deep breath, you exhale, everything relax. That's a normal response. If you have had significant developmental trauma over a ways, this becomes your system. You become a light switch. Something happens, that system gets activated, and it stays activated. And what this means for teachers is there's an incident home in the morning, a kid kind of goes into a freeze state, he shuts down, he's kind of makes it through the bus ride, he's sitting in the classroom, he's kind of not engaged, he's not really there, and then all of a sudden, some kid bumps into his desk and he beats the crap out of him. And if you're not thinking of it from a trauma perspective, what you're thinking is, what the heck? Everything was quiet, everything was peaceful, nothing happened to him. But as you look back and say, wait, I wonder at what point in his life this morning he got activated. What kind of set him off? Because as you start thinking that way, you become very, very aware of what are those warning signs for kids? What are those things for kids that are little cues for you that they are either in a hyper or a hypo state? And then, because you have that knowledge, all right, this kid is already turned on. So I either need to do some things to make sure that everyone else is safe, or I need to do something to help him come out of that response. So it's a very useful process to always remember that systems that have gone through developmental trauma do not regulate the way they're supposed to, so kids will get stuck. All right. My one story, and this one I started telling by accident, but it's become my favorite story. I run on the bike path a lot. And when they first built the bike path in Lancaster, there was a place, if you're a runner, you know this, it's over by Cherry Street Park, where there is, was a junkyard, still there. And in the junkyard, there was these dogs who had been socialized, trained to bark and scream and make a lot of noise at everyone that comes in. And if you were running, you were kind of in this sort of relaxed, chilled out place, and all of a sudden, these dogs would jump at the fence and start barking at you and going crazy. And every single time, you'd kind of freak out. And then you kind of go, oh, wait, they're behind the fence. I've been here through 10 times. I know that. I'm safe. I calm myself down, I go on. So then what happens after we go through a while is you kind of go, oh, I'm going under the train tracks. I'm about to come up on that place where the dogs are. They're going to bark at me. All right. And so I kind of relax myself, relax my jaw, relax my belly, take a deep breath, let myself chill out a second. And so they come up at the fence and they bark, and you kind of go, oh, I'm getting barked at, but I'm okay. And so you kind of learn to kind of prepare for these situations, and then you don't have those trauma reactions anymore, or triggers, we'll call them. But that's not what this story is about. So this is what happened. Once I kind of got myself regulated, I started talking to the dogs. Hey, are you guys having a good day? Man, I might sing to them if I was listening to music and they'd sing along. And then I started talking to other runners, and I found out, wait, it's not just me. It's all these other people that are talking to these dogs. It's all these other people that are kind of spending time with these dogs. And then I came across a woman, oh yeah, I carry treats in my pocket for the dogs now. And over months, something really interesting happened. The junkyard dogs weren't junkyard dogs anymore. There were people that, as you were running, stopped, looked at you, kind of ran alongside of you, kind of looked for that attention. And this has become how I understand trauma-informed environments. We as a community can start doing all the right things. We can start making the environment safe. We can start making things predictable. We can modulate ourselves and look at our own reactions. We can intervene in a positive way with the individuals that we're working with, whether they're kids or dogs. We can do all those things. And what we will get is the exact same behavior from those kids for a while, probably for a long while. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because that's the way they've been raised. That's the environment that they come through. That's what their survival strategies are. But with a very coordinated, consistent response, not fighting with them about their behavior, but focusing on how do we connect with them? How do we intervene in a way that makes them feel connected to us? How do we relate to them? The behavior starts to shift. And that's trauma-informed environments to me. That's a trauma-informed school. Everybody from the secretaries to the janitors to the bus drivers to the teachers to the aides plays a role in this, because if the intervention people are doing good intervention stuff, and then you walk out and the secretary's giving them grief about whatever they're giving grief on, it just brings back that I'm a bad kid, I'm in shame, all of that reactivity. So it becomes a concerted effort to look at our policies and procedures, our environment, and everybody in our building is actually responding in a way that supports this message that you're safe here, you can be okay. And this is just a slide I threw in there because it reminds me to say something. I think a lot of times we do things that we think are making people feel safe when we're not. And so it's really, really important sometimes to step back and say, is what I'm doing getting a response that looks like this person is feeling safe from it? Because we can plan out all these wonderful strategies, but it's that feedback we get from our clients about, oh, wait, this might not be the best thing to do with them. So only going to talk about this for 2 minutes. So it's a few things that as I think of what a trauma-informed community is. It's first recognizing it. And we talked about ACEs, and I'm sure you've heard enough about it. When you look at the numbers, 67% of us have had at least one of those negative experiences. And I think it's 12% of us have had four or more of these. So this isn't a, oh, this is a few people. This is all of us. And I think that's the other part that we need to remember is it's not just us, these helping professionals that have all these great things and these poor traumatized people that were helping us. Because guess what? I know a lot of therapists, teachers, judges, lawyers, and we as the professionals have a whole lot of trauma stuff going on from our life too. So it's really important that we are able to pay attention to our own stuff as it's getting triggered. And also having enough of a teamwork approach that when you're working with someone, knowing what their triggers are, your co-teacher or partner, so that when something happens that kind of sets them off, you're able to kind of support them and help them regulate. 10-second story. I worked with a gentleman in a drug and alcohol treatment center when I was in college. And he was really, really good with the youth that we were working with until there was a couple things that kids could say that would really set him off. And so I kind of got in the habit of listening. Oh, he's doing well, he's doing well, he's doing well. Oh, he might not be doing well. Because once we start this team stuff and pay attention to each other, we can learn each other's things and help each other regulate. All right. I'm going to say I believe in co-regulation more than anything else I believe in these days. If I can be with someone who is upset, if I can slow myself down, if I can slow my breathing down, if I can be back in my body, I can let myself be okay, and I can be near someone while they kind of struggle with gaining control of themselves, then we can support people through trauma. It's something we do really, really well with babies. In the shelter, when someone would, an infant would come in and were very cranky and overwhelmed. I mean, just that picking them up and holding them close to you and humming and singing and breathing with them helps them develop that regulation. But here's the thing, if you're working with a kid who didn't have that training early on, then we need to do that regulation with them later in life even. Actually, we need to do it all the time. And this is here's my other annoying thing. I've noticed people when they're working with kids or other people and the kids are struggling, we tend to get controlling and bossy and try to fix things and make things happen and yada, yada, yada. And then when our friends or people we really care about, especially peers, are having a bad day, we have this amazing level of empathy. And we know, hey, you're struggling today. What do you need? How do we be there for you? Let me just sit here with you. Let's go have a glass of wine, a cup of tea. Because I think intuitively we know this stuff. And that's the neat part about doing trauma-informed stuff is it is mostly about us calming down, us being settled in our own body, and then allowing that natural connection we have with people to come forward. I don't think there's the thing to do with people, but us dealing with our own stuff and being present so that we can be there for them. You will be amazed at the responses that you come with. Sometimes it's energetic stuff. Sometimes I find myself singing. Sometimes I find myself humming. So how do we regulate? how do we stay regulated, and how do we help others regulate? So grounding is really just that, attaching to the present moment. So how do we pay attention to what's going on right now? How do we pay attention to our bodies? And then once we kind of have that ability to ground, how do we start to pay attention to what's happening inside of our bodies? And this is one that I will kind of throw in now because I'm not sure how much we'll get into today. The reason I played the video at the beginning, and the reason I wanted you to kind of think about it, is when we are traumatized, because of all of the pain and the anguish and the physiological stuff that's going on in our bodies, we lose the ability to be aware of what's happening in our bodies. We lose the ability to pay attention to our feelings. We don't know what our heart is. The word for it's introception, that ability to be aware of what's happening internally. It's actually why when you have kids with some developmental trauma and they're under stress, you have so many toileting accidents all of a sudden, because even sensing those kind of things are not there for kids. And especially if you've had kids that have had sexual abuse, they have no sensation in some of those parts of their body, so they really don't have a lot of those feelings. So a lot of what we're doing in terms of interventions is helping them reconnect to their body. How do you be present in what's happening with me right now? Resourcing is developing positive experiences, paying attention to those good things in our life, noticing them. And tracking is just sensing some of those feelings in your body, whether they're positive or negative, but then actually learning to attune to some of the positive feelings that you're having. Because if you've been in that hyper-aroused state all the time, you are very good at noticing the negative, you're really good at noticing the danger, you're really good at noticing when you're in fear, and you're really, really bad about noticing anything positive that's happening. You're really bad about noticing when you sort of can feel joy. You're really, really bad about managing any emotion. And this is, I've noticed for years, kids that have developmental trauma who have difficulty managing anger also have a horrible time managing joy and happiness. That makes them as dysregulated. So, which is the nice part, because if you're teaching regulation, you can actually teach people to regulate happiness, and they will learn some skills out of that. Nope. And this is just something I use with people. It gives words to some of the feelings, because if you're going to have people start to connect to sensations in their body, we not only don't know it's there, but then when we notice it, we don't really have a word to describe it or feel it. I learned a long time ago that we teach kids about feelings, happy, sad, mad, scared, but if they don't have an intraceptive awareness of what's going on in their body, they really can't deal with those feelings. So your goal is not to teach people how to manage feelings, it's to teach people to be aware of what happens with those feelings in their body and learn to manage sensation in their body. So reorganizing, realize what time it is. So I want to take 5 minutes, and just because it's the end of the day, and just because I've been talking a lot, I just want to do a really, really quick kind of thing, just to do a mindfulness activity. We're not going to do a lot of the weird ones. I just want to do just some of that grounding, resourcing, and tracking. So let me find good music. While I'm looking, if you haven't spent any time reading Bruce Perry and the neurosequential stuff, when he talked about what actually heals trauma, he came back to relational, repetitive, and rhythmic. So things that get you connected to another person, things that happen over and over again, and things that have rhythm to it. I keep remembering, I've always thought about all of those games that we play as a kid. Sometimes when we do this in person and we're doing mostly activities as opposed to me talking, which is really weird for me, by the way, we do stuff like rainmaking. I don't know if you did it in summer camp. But even doing those activities throughout the day that use rhythm, that use awareness, that use sound, whether it's music or dance or drumming or storytelling. So I'm going to shut up for a second, because if you're as sick of my voice as I am, we need a break. Let me find something pretty.
Okay, we're not sick of hearing your voice at all, Keith.
Oh, I'm on my own nerves right now. This isn't this. I cannot do training over Zoom. I'm making myself crazy here, but we're going to take a second.
This is great stuff. So.
Thank you. So just for a moment, notice yourself in the chair. If you want to point your camera towards the ceiling so nobody can see you, it's a great way to kind of relax and get away from it. And just begin by noticing your feet on the floor. Noticing yourself in the chair. Let the muscles in your jaw relax. Let your shoulders relax. Let your belly be soft. And just begin to be aware of the movement of your breath in your body. Notice wherever you feel, notice it the most. Whether you notice the movement in your chest, the rising of your belly, the coolness of the air, as it goes down your throat. And then begin in your mind to just think of someone who recently has been there to support you. Whether it's a friend who's called to check on you, a family member that surprised you with something positive, or maybe it's something like just a good day you had in nature, sitting by the lake. Whatever that positive thing that's helped you recently, just bring that image to your mind. And as you really hold that image in your mind, let yourself notice where you feel that in your body. What part of your body starts to relax? If you can give that sensation a word, a color, a shape, what would that be? Kind of a warm, tingly feeling in your chest. A softness in your belly. And then just take one more minute to be really aware of your body and notice if there's something it wants to do, whether it's move or stretch or yawn. And when you're ready, kind of just make your way back into the space. There's one other thought. I have 1,000 thoughts, but there's one other one that I really want to throw out there. We started at the beginning with that tape. And one of the other things that comes off of it that you really would help you if you're aware of is that trauma is this freezing, this energy that gets trapped in your body. And it gets frozen there. And it's part of what keeps us disconnected from ourselves. So as we do things like movement and dance and walking and exercise and yoga and physical stuff with our kids, we start to unwind. I do mindful dancing, strangest thing I'm involved with. Dancing Mindfulness Columbus, we're doing dance tonight. If anyone wants to come join us, they're even doing it virtually. But it's how do you reconnect with your physical self, and how do you start to unwind enough to let that energy comes out? And I guess I have to say it, even though I'm trying to stop talking. A lot of times as kids start to get connected with that, there's that energy release, and it's this physical, whether it's shaking, whether it's movement, whether it's stretching. And a lot of times when they're reacting up, we're very much, you need to sit still, you need to calm down, we need to do all this calming stuff. If a kid is releasing energy in a way that's safe and productive, a lot of times that is a normal trauma response. If you think of, I'm almost in a car crash, I go into a freeze response, my body shuts down. Half an hour later, I reconnect with my body, I start to relax, and then I start to, whether it's shake, whether it's cry, whether it's move around, whether it's pace, whether it's can't sit still, that's that energy that got stuck in that trauma releasing itself. If you've had developmental trauma, you have years and years of that stuck held energy. And so as we get kids aware of their bodies, you will have those reactions that are physiological, and you would think that you are doing something wrong and that you should help them relax. But if they're doing it in a constructive way and giving them outlets that are very physical, whether it's drawing and scribbling and pounding with clay, or you probably figured out I've been playing with putty since I started this thing because I need something to do with my hands, because when I'm in stress, I need to do something that releases that energy. So finding those physical things that help us move forward are really, really useful. Since I'm in a cartoon mood today, if I can find it in 10 seconds, then we're going to go there. So this is my closing for today. If you can pay attention to one thing, pay attention to how you are handling what's going around you. Because if in your interactions with people, you are grounded and you are centered and you are present and you are relational, then it doesn't matter specifically what you're doing, you're creating them with a healing environment. On the reverse of that, if you are worried and on edge and anxious and scared and not aware of those reactions in your own body and are just in a reactive place, it doesn't matter the words you use, it doesn't matter the behavior you use. Those behaviors will not help people settle and ground and be attached to themselves. So I leave you with, find ways to take care of yourself, find ways to be present, and practice that self-care, because that will be what allows you to be present with your clients. And with that, I am going to stop for today. So I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your patience. If anyone baked anything really good while this was going on, I'm at the courthouse. Feel free to drop it off. And have a good day.
Oh,
Thank
thanks, Keith.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you so